It's interesting how the Spirit really does work, because just as Denise was speaking about Aristotle and the gods that he would have been familiar with, or the gods that possibly he would even have worshipped, couldn't really do diddly squat. But the God that we worship is a God that changes things. Exactly the same as if we look into the book of Daniel, which we're going to continue in this morning. The gods of Nebuchadnezzar couldn't do anything. The sorcerers, those who were into fortune telling, those who were into witchcraft, could have tried to call on their gods, but they wouldn't have got an answer to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And yet when Daniel steps in, and Daniel prays to the one and only God, 3 guesses what happens. He gets an answer. And that's the kind of God that we worship today. The God who gives answers. The God who we can have a relationship with, a personal relationship with, and a God who gives us answers. Last week, we looked very briefly at how Daniel was willing to stand up for the truth, stand up for what he actually believed at any cost. And the cost potentially could have been a threat to his life. He could have been killed for what he was standing up for. And then we went on to speak about the forgotten dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. And then a prayer meeting, possibly a prayer meeting with only 4 people in it. And yet what a prayer meeting that was. A prayer meeting wherein God came in and really gave a vision to Daniel in that evening. And then we come to the point where Daniel stands before this king. And what I think we've got to try and keep in our mind when we're thinking about Daniel and thinking about what happened is that all this happened in Babylon. And Babylon wasn't known for its Christianity. Babylon wasn't known for being connected with God. Babylon was a horrible place. And yet, in that evil place, Daniel was willing to stand up for what is true. Just a couple of points in reference to Daniel before the king. And we can see these in verses 24 to 30 of chapter 2. It gives us another insight into the character of Daniel. The first thing I think we need to realize when we're looking at Daniel is the fact that he wasn't timid. He must have been a very, very strong person, thinking about this king and thinking about what he stood for. And yet, Daniel goes before this king and he asks that the Chaldeans' lives could be spared. These guys who hadn't been able to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dream, never mind tell him what he dreamt, they were for the high jump, to say the least. These guys' necks were on the line. Nebuchadnezzar had promised that earlier, and he said, if no one can interpret or tell me what the dream was, then they're going to die. Daniel goes before them, has compassion, and asks that these men's lives be spared. I wonder how we would stand with that. Would we be willing to go before someone who is evil, someone who is bad, and ask for lives to be spared? So we see the compassion and how merciful he actually was. And he wasn't a selfish person. Even in this, he was thinking of others. I think I may have said this last week, but throughout the book of Daniel, you can see a picture of Christ as well. And for me, this, what Daniel did, is a picture of Christ. Because Jesus is interceding for you and for me. People who had went astray, those of us who had sinned, those of us who had done wrong in the eyes of God, Jesus is interceding before God for us. How do we know that? We just need to go to Romans 8 and verse 34, where it says, Jesus, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. You see the compassion of Christ? You see the care for Christ? You see how merciful he is, how graceful he is? That he is willing to go before the King of Kings, to go before God and intercede for us. Daniel could easily have taken the credit for what he did. But no, Daniel gives God the glory. In verse 30, we see his humility. It says, "But as for me, the mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation be made known to the king, that you may know the thoughts of your mind." You see, it was God that gave the interpretation. It was God that told him the dream. And we see that Daniel doesn't take any credit for it himself. So often I feel nowadays that we are quick to take the credit when something good happens. And yet we need to give all the glory and all the praise to the one who gives the answer. There is nothing sweeter than seeing a person who walks in humility. I'm sure, like me, you have seen many. And it's a beautiful thing to witness. People not pointing to themselves, but people pointing to Christ or God. And then we come to the revelation and interpretation of this dream, verses 31 to 35. It says, "You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. The image mighty of exceeding brightness stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of the image was of fine gold. its chest and arms of silver, in the middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of irons, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand. It struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold, all together were broken into pieces and became like chaff of the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the earth. Let me read that last section again, because it's a powerful, powerful section. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the earth. The image, this was an image of a man, and we'll see later on that it's so wrong to worship man. It's so wrong to idolize men or women. There is only one thing or one person that we should worship, and that is God, God the Father. You see, this was a beautiful image. It was dazzling. It was pleasing to the eye. It had gold in it, it had silver in it, it had bronze in it. In the bright sun, it would be dazzling. Sadly, what is always pleasing to the eye isn't good for the soul. If we go back to Genesis 3, verse 6, it says this: when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. You see, Eve looked at that fruit, and it was pleasing to the eye. But what happened to Eve? Adam and Eve got cast out of the Garden of Eden. It may have been pleasing to the eye, but for the soul, for the spirituality, it wasn't good. In fact, it was the exact opposite, because that is when death came in. They were cast out. Just the same as this image would have been pleasing to the eyes, but if men, Daniel and the other three, had bowed down to it, then it would have been detriment to their soul. I wonder in our own life, what it is we worship. What is it that we bow down to? Is it man or is it God? We come through this passage and we see different metals which we could have spoke on, but this morning we're going to miss these different metals and go straight to where it speaks about the stone cut not by human hands. I have no doubt that this stone is a reference to the coming Messiah. This stone is a reference to Christ. We see it crushes the feet of the statue. We see that that statue is eventually destroyed. The picture of Christ as a stone or rock is intimately woven by the Spirit throughout both the Old and New Testaments. And if you want to do it, it actually makes for a fascinating study. Just looking at the references where Jesus is likened to a stone. To destroy something is to take the feet from them. And as we know, one day the evil one will be totally and utterly destroyed. I wasn't going to say this, but actually it came to mind again. When I was doing my kickboxing, there was one move that you could do that would flatten the opponent in one foul swoop. And if you saw them standing square onto you, like I'm standing square onto you, if you swung your leg, crouched down, swung your leg, and hit one leg, that leg would hit the other one, and it would fall flat quite easily. You see, if we attack the feet, it can destroy the whole of the image. Christ is going to come, and he's going to destroy not only images, but he's going to destroy the evil one. Right at its root, right where he stands. We have nothing, those who believe have nothing to be scared of, because as I've said on many occasions, we are on the winning side. No matter what comes our way, we are on the winning side. And we'll see as we go through Daniel, we'll see how not only does God provide for Daniel, but God protects Daniel as well. He doesn't only provide and protect, but he promotes Daniel. And that is something amazing. Verse 36, I think it is, says, "This was a dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation." Donald Campbell tells the story of a modern day Daniel. Billy Graham, in his early days of Dr. Billy Graham's evangelistic ministry, he held a series of meetings in Dallas Cotton Bowl. As the services were coming to a climax, the challenge was to fill the 70,000-seat stadium, especially on that final Sunday evening service. The word was out. Certain gambling elements were betting that it couldn't be done. But on the last night, a cheer went up from the crowd as the last seat was taken. A well-known columnist for the Dallas Morning News devoted an entire column the next week to the event. He posed the question, how can a young man without a semi-education draw such a crowd of people when some of the highly educated and robed downtown ministers preach to half-filled churches on Sunday mornings? Answering his own question, the columnist said, it's because Billy Graham preaches what the Bible says. He has a note of authority in his message. and so did Daniel. You see, Billy Graham was in touch with God. Billy Graham spoke the truth from the Word. Daniel was in touch with God. And Daniel just try to get my point here. I think it's verse 37. It has, for me anyway, it has a good few interesting points. And maybe it doesn't sit well with us, these points, but they're there. The first one is this: God raised up this tyrannical pagan king to chasten rebellious Judah. God raised up the king to chasten the rebellious Judah. Babylon was in power only about 70 years, the same time during which Israel or Judah was being disciplined. And last one, I don't know if we'll agree with this, but the last one is God used this pagan king to present his prophetic plan for the ages. How can that be? God using a pagan king to present what was going to happen in the future? You see, if we think about it, this pagan king went to, where was it? Jerusalem, was it? And he captured Daniel and the others, took them back to Babylon, and then Daniel worked from Babylon. You see, God put someone in place not only to restore Israel, but to tell what was going to happen in future. Sometimes we worry today about those who are in leadership. Maybe we should be praying that God puts somebody in place to help with what's going on. Maybe not praying against the leadership as per se, but actually praying that God will put somebody in to change things, because that's what happened here. God used Nebuchadnezzar to capture Daniel, to bring him down to Babylon so that things could change. You see, God will and can use any means for his glory. God can and does use anyone to future his kingdom. And then we come, lastly, and I'm going to be brief today. We come lastly to the effect upon Nebuchadnezzar and the promotion of Daniel and his companions. And if we look at the end of the chapter, it says this: Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, listen to this: Truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries. For you have been able to reveal this mystery. Wow! An evil king bowing down before God. An evil king accepting or admitting that Daniel's God is the one God. An evil king recognizing that Daniel's God is Lord and King. And Daniel's God is the only one that can reveal the mysteries. Not the Chaldeans' gods, not Nebuchadnezzar's gods, but Daniel's God. You see the difference? When God intervenes, not only when God intervenes, but when believers stand up for the truth, evil kings bow before their God. Isn't that a turn up for the books? Rather than being defeatist, you are defeating. Rather than hiding away in the shadow, if we stand up for the truth, it's not going to be easy. We're not saying it's easy. It's going to be difficult. I'm sure when Daniel was standing there to a certain extent and telling Nebuchadnezzar that his God had revealed that mystery to him, his knees were probably shaking because his neck was in the line. If he didn't get it right, boy, he was for a high jump. But you see, Daniel had faith in his God. Daniel knew that his God would pull through in the end. Daniel knew that his God would turn up. And the first thing that we notice is the fact that the king fell on his face. I've said it before. When we come face to face with God, when we come face to face with Christ, we fall on our knees at the awe and the wonder and the glory of who God is. Nebuchadnezzar recognized the God of Daniel. And we know this when he said, "Your God," not my God, but your God has revealed the mysteries. You know, we may think it's finished, but God is still revealing the mysteries to us today. Who can explain the mystery of salvation? Where someone didn't walk the same walk as God, didn't follow Jesus, all of a sudden gets convicted, gets born again, and starts following Christ. For me, that's a mystery. God reveals the mysteries of the Scriptures. I remember saying to my father, who probably was in his 80s at this point and had studied the Bible most of his life. And I remember saying to my father, "You must have exhausted the Bible by this. You've studied it, you've read it, you've studied it for years. Surely you've got to the bottom of it by now." And his answer was this: "No. The mysteries are new every morning. They're new every morning." See, the deeper we get into it, the more God reveals. The more we mature as believers, the more God reveals. And for me, that is amazing. And with this, I'm just going to finish. Because we see towards the end, it says, "Then the king gave high honors and many great gifts, and made Daniel ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request to the king, and the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. You see the blessing? You see the promotion? The promotion from literally being a slave, literally being captured by this king's army and being taken to Babylon as a slave. Daniel becomes the highest person in that whole province. Why? Because he stood up for what was true. He was able to tap into the mysteries that God could reveal. He was able to witness before the king and tell the king the dream and the interpretation of the dream. God was at work away at the very beginning. And because of what Daniel did, Daniel got promoted. Isn't that amazing? You see, I think there's a lesson in that for us as well. Because if we stick by the scriptures, if we stick by what is true, then we will receive blessings. Constant blessings. And these blessings will come from the one and true God. If you want to get ahead of me, then look at chapter 3 for next week, an exciting chapter in the book of Daniel. Some of these stories, as I said last week, those who were brought up through the Sunday school would have heard them time and time again. But it's good to go over them again and delve into these great stories and great characters of the Bible. And maybe, I think we're going to sing Gratitude. Yeah. Those who are able, you might stand and sing our final hymn, which is Gratitude.